The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John, and he led them up a high mountain where they could be alone. And there in their presence he was transfigured. His face shone like sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Suddenly Moses and Elijah appeared to them, and they were talking with him. And then Peter spoke to Jesus. Lord, he said, it is wonderful for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He was still speaking when suddenly a bright cloud covered them with shadow. And from the cloud there came a voice which said, this is my son, the beloved. Listen to him. When they heard this, the disciples fell on their faces, overcome with fear. But Jesus came up and touched them. Stand up, he said. Do not be afraid. And when they raised their eyes, they saw no one there but only Jesus. As they came down from the mountain, Jesus gave them this order. Tell no one about the vision until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
The Transfiguration is a text that we hear several times in the year. So during Lent, one of our Sundays, we'll have this reading of the Transfiguration. But today we celebrate the Feast of the Transfiguration. And it's set in the liturgy a little differently because of the other readings that it is set with. This reading is a reminder to us of the truth and the essence of Christianity. And I think it's one of the things that we have gotten wrong in the last while. More and more people are seeing Christianity as a willpower religion. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You have these things you have to do, like you have to go to Mass on Sunday. You have to do this. You have to do that. You're not supposed to do this, and you're not supposed to do that. I'm not sure what it is you're not supposed to do, but that's a whole other story. I'm sure you know better than me. And because we've seen Christianity as a willpower religion, we've also seen the role of Christianity within the world as regulating right and wrong and regulating the morals of society. And I'm not sure that that's a role either. But today we have a peek into the mystery that is Christ. And this peek invites us to see Christianity from a very different perspective and to live it from a very different perspective. If we start with our first reading from the book of Daniel, and then I saw in my dreams and my visions wheels set in motion, and there was one of great age standing on this throne, and his clothes was white as dazzling light, and on. His hair was like wool, and on and on. Who is this vision about? Who is this? Yeah, this is God. This is God. The one of great age standing on this throne with fire coming out of this throne and all of this incredible imagery. I think that Spielberg or somebody has to take this and do something with it. This can't be captured easily. And if God is a one of great age standing on this throne, what is the fire? The fire is the Holy Spirit. The fire is the Holy Spirit. And next in the text, there comes the Son of Man riding on the clouds. I could just see him surfing, you know. Riding on the clouds, coming, and on him is conferred sovereignty and power. And who is this we're speaking about? So here in the Old Testament is a theophany, an appearance of the Trinity, an appearance of the triune God already in mystic form, in veiled form. Already we have in the Old Testament the Father, the Son, and the Spirit present. Present. And now we come to the New Testament, to the reading that we have. And what's the most striking thing in that text about Jesus? His clothes were white. One text will say whiter than any earthly bleacher can make it. I don't know if the older ones will remember the bleachers outside. You remember the bleacher you put? And you put the sun after the blue soap out in the sun to get white. As white as possible. Not like this, real white. Real white. It's interesting that here Jesus is the one whose clothes are white. In Daniel, it is God whose clothes are white. Correct? And that's because the text is saying to us that Jesus is God. Jesus is God. He is the one with this dazzling white light and clothes that's emanating from him. And the cloud that comes. Remember, so the text, because they're up on a high mountain, and a high mountain is where God always appears to people. Like Sinai, where Moses was. And up on Sinai, when Moses was walking up Sinai, remember what happened? The clouds surrounded the mountain, and the fire was bursting forth. And then God led the people with a pillar of cloud by day and a fire by night. And the cloud is the Holy Spirit, or the fire. These two images, cloud by day, fire by night, these are images of the Holy Spirit. And so here on this mountain, we have Jesus who is there with his dazzling white, the Spirit coming as a cloud, and then somebody is speaking. And who is speaking? The Father is speaking. And so here we have another theophany, another manifestation of the Holy Trinity. The Father who is speaking, the Son who is there and being transformed, the Spirit which is a cloud. And Peter, James, and John are seeing this with their eyes. And that's why Peter says in our second reading, we have seen with our eyes the glory that is manifest in him. And we heard with our ears the voice of the Father that spoke about his favor, that this is my beloved Son. And that's why in our second reading, Peter is interpreting this event for us, saying to us, I was there, I saw, I heard, I was present. I am the witness that says that this one, Jesus, was transfigured. He was transfigured. And so we have a witness now to this whole event. But here's the thing. In this incredible moment in Jesus' life, he's up this high mountain, and this cloud comes down, and Peter starts talking foolishness. Let you go and build 3 tents now. You know, Peter, my boy, I love him, to death. To death. He wanted 3 tents, and this is symbolic of the Feast of Tabernacles when they would build tents. But 3 tents weren't necessary, because God is not 3. God is only 1. And so 3 tents aren't necessary, because although there's a manifestation of this, it's only one God. Elijah and Moses are there as the greatest prophet and as the lawgiver. Moses is the lawgiver. The first 5 books of the Bible belong to Moses. And the prophetic writings, Elijah is the greatest of the prophets. And so the lawgiver and the prophets are witnessing that Jesus is the Son of God. So not only is Peter witnessing, but Moses and Elijah are witnessing. And in their witness, they're saying to us something. That the whole of the Old Testament, because another way that the Jews referred to the Old Testament is the law and the prophets. The whole of the Old Testament is here witnessing that Jesus is the Son of God. The whole of the Old Testament. And that's how the church reads the New Testament. Through the lens of the Old Testament, through the witness of the Old Testament, we open and read the New Testament. But here's the thing now. The light that is emanating in Jesus' clothes, his face, his appearance, his aspect, is not just a light on him. It's a light coming from him. Because the text is speaking about Jesus as the Son of God, as God himself. We have done a strange and silly proposition talking about Jesus as a good man, a prophet, a moral teacher. And yes, he's all of these things. But if that's all he is, we should not listen to him. Because if that's all he is, he's a liar. Because he claims to be God. You can't claim to be God and be a good man and a prophet if you're not God. The last guy that came to me claiming to be God, I put him in St. Anne's for 3 months. He was having an episode. He had a psychotic episode. If Jesus is who the witnesses say he is, then he is God. And if he is God, there's something else the text is asking of us. Because the light that is emanating from God, which is Father, Son, and Spirit. And this light that is emanating is shining upon the apostles and breaking forth. In this one moment, the veil was torn and the apostles were able to peek through the veil and see what the truth is, that God is light. Isn't that what John says in his prologue? Light from light. And isn't that what we say in the creed? Light from light, God from God, true God from true God. And the light came into the world, and the world knew him not, because men preferred darkness to the light. And so this light that is emanating is another image of God. But you know, all of this is fine and nice, huh? But here's what. Jesus also says in John's Gospel, make your home in as I make mine. For the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, we will come to you and we will dwell in you. In you. For the Christian, the Trinity that is appearing in Daniel, that is appearing in the Transfiguration, the Holy Trinity is living within us. This light, the Old Testament called the Shekinah glory, is the glory of God that descended upon the Ark of the Covenant when the tabernacle was made. It is the glory of God that descended upon Moses when his face was shining. It is the glory of God that shines forth into the world to transform the whole world. And the darkness of the world cannot stand before this light of God. And this Shekinah glory is inside of every single one of us. And that is the truth. The Shekinah glory is everywhere, and that too is the truth. They were invited into this new dimension where they saw the truth of reality for what it is, that God is shining out everywhere, everywhere. And that God is present everywhere. And this God that created the heavens, the earth, the cosmos, the stars, everything, that this God is in us, shining out of us. And the only thing that stops the power of God from transforming us and the world is that we don't see and don't live and don't allow this shining power and energy for good to work in us and shine through us out to the world. Our free will is what stops the Shekinah glory from transforming the world. Our free will is what stops God from transforming the world. And that's also in the text. Because as soon as it came face to face with the power of God, they fell to their faces in fear. We have so domesticated God. You know, he's become our chum, our pal, our best friend, our bestest friend. You know, we so domesticated God that, you know, closer to God, closer to church, we kind of start treating with scant regard that which we hold too close. We so domesticated God that we stop seeing God as God. We stop seeing it. To really come face to face with God is to fall to your face in fear and trembling. The ego cannot stand to be in the face of God, because the ego is everything that is false about us. Everything that we want to be that is really not true. It's all our illusionary life that we keep projecting out to make everybody believe how great we actually are. And it's all a lie. And when it comes to the face of the truth, it cannot stand. And so because of that, every time we come face to face with God, we tremble because something must die. And when the ego is called to die, it resists it. And so it becomes insidious in its fight against it. And then we, rather than standing there in this vulnerability before God, we run for cover. And we try to hide and portray ourselves back as we are. That's why Adam and Eve in the garden, the first thing they did was they went and hid. Because they couldn't stand to be naked before God. To be a Christian is to walk a mystical way. To be a Christian is to learn how to be naked before God and to be vulnerable and to know the fear of that, and yet stand there knowing that this is love and that God will transform us through this. But our running to hide and cover up and to live this safe and comfortable life and to live this life where we have everything well ordered and we are totally in control of everything, this is the greatest pernicious act that we do in our lives. Because it is a stopping of God breaking forth in and through us, shining out from us into the world. God is a consuming fire. And this consuming fire lives in you and lives in me. And it wants to consume the whole world. And we are the ones stopping God from the transformation of myself, my family, my community, and my world. Let us today, as we come to the Eucharist, as we receive him again as bread, vulnerable that he comes to us, let us recognize that this Holy Trinity in us is asking something of us. Let us dare to say yes to him. Let us dare today to say yes to God. And if today you hear his voice, harden not your heart as on that day in Meribah in the desert when you put me to the test. If today you hear his voice calling on your heart, please, I beg you, do not close your heart. Dare to be vulnerable. Dare to stand in the fear of facing God and say yes to whatever it is he's asking you in your life.